Hey, so today I sit down with James Carroll from Thor Laser or NovoTHOR. Now, I'm super pumped to speak to him again because James is like, I don't know, my go-to guy when it comes to red light therapy. He's been in the space longer than I've been alive. And that's a long time. He knows his stuff. He's very passionate about this. He means well, and he's always more than happy to share information. So I traveled over to London. I knew he was going to be at Health Optimization 2024. By the way, you should head to that event. Actually, speaking of events, hang around until the end of the video because there is an event that James and I will be at, and so will some of the best researchers in the red light therapy space. So we'll talk about that later in the video. Anyway, traveled to London. I had a chance to catch up with him, and I asked if he'd sit down for a conversation, and yeah, he said yes. So it's a massive win, not only for me, but for you guys as well, because his content is really, really good. I spoke to him after his presentation. He did a presentation on photobiomodulation, as he calls it, and human longevity. So it's very, very fascinating. We talk about that, but then we also went down into some other topics as well. So you know what? Let's just get into it. You guys are going to enjoy it. I know it. It's always a good chat. Before we do that though, I do need to just read out a little disclaimer. I am not a doctor. James is not a doctor. This upcoming conversation is intended to provide professional medical audiences with an education on the background and the state of photobiomodulation. The FDA has not approved any PBM products for use in the United States, and all references to PBM and its potential applications are for educational purposes for Americans. Now, James is the CEO of Thor Laser, which make the very popular NovoTHOR bed. So yeah, I guess you could argue there is a little bit of biasness there, but as you're going to see from this interview, he is very passionate about this stuff, and he's just tapped into technology that is very beneficial for humans. So he's doing his best to get this as far and wide as possible, and I guess that's why he was happy to sit down and have this conversation. All right, let's go. It's great. You're going to enjoy it. Okay, so I'm here today with James Carroll from NovoTHOR, and we're going to talk about how photobiomodulation, or red light therapy for us commoners, can help not only with health, but also health span. So James, always a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're very busy today, and I'm sure you've got a lot of people to see and meet. So tell me, how's red light therapy? How's this beautiful light that we're shining on ourselves? How's it helping us live longer?
Right. Well, better health span, because we wouldn't want you to live longer in pain.
Good point, yeah.
And so, yes, improving health span has become the new word, I think. I've been thinking, coming up to this conference, about what I was going to speak to, and what I was going to speak about to a sort of an audience interested in health optimization being the name of the conference. And it occurs to me there are biomarkers and health metrics which should correlate with a better health span. So I decided to look it up and make that my presentation at this conference. So how photobiomodulation, which is the medical word for red light therapy, how might it help improve health span? So the answer is to delay the four main causes of non-accidental death. So what are those? There's atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, the main cause of heart attacks, strokes, and chronic kidney disease. Cancer, of course, is high on the list too. Neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, type 2 diabetes and related metabolic dysfunction. The short answer to that is that the four main causes of non-accidental death have got good evidence for the benefit of diet, exercise, and sleep. And if you can enhance those, you will do well. Other things help as well. If you choose to be happy, if you make friends, have good relationships, if you can find your purpose in life, a meaningful life helps as well with these things. But how can photobiomodulation help? So photobiomodulation has been clinically proven to enhance exercise performance, improve sleep quality, reduce nocturnal hypertension, and reduce oxidative damage. So in sort of plain English, you can exercise harder, you get less fatigue, it's easier to return to your exercise sooner. You know, your delayed onset muscle soreness is reduced or doesn't happen at all. So you can exercise more frequently and longer. Improving sleep quality means that people are, and the clinical evidence that I show in a presentation is that people are actually sleeping. This is going to sound strange because everyone knows they should be sleeping more because sleep is essential for your recovery, rest and sleep. Very good for your recovery and for dealing with stress. And photobiomodulation has been demonstrated to reduce the amount of time it takes for that to happen. In the data I present, of 12 elite female soccer players in the United States wearing an Oura ring for a competitive season and using NovoTHOR regularly, were able to sleep on average 38 minutes less sleep per day. The Oura ring confirmed that they had a lower resting heart rate and they had improved heart rate variability, and they are actually sleeping less. They needed less sleep, and they were getting better recovery than before they were using NovoTHOR.
So what were they doing exactly? Using NovoTHOR daily, once a week?
So what they did is they would use it, actually they only used it about twice a month, which isn't enough.
Right.
However, what isn't optimal, but they wanted to get the metrics. So what they did is they would have a training day and then they would measure their sleep overnight, heart rate variability, resting heart rate, and amount of sleep. And specifically they compared REM sleep, deep sleep, light sleep, and the deep sleep was not affected. They had the full amount of deep sleep despite having 38. So it compressed the other forms of sleep in that study. So they were convinced that the participants were actually getting fully rested. In fact, the metrics were better on the short sleep having used NovoTHOR. And I noticed I haven't finished the timing of the stories. So the timing is this: they'd have a training day, they'd go to sleep, they wear their Oura ring, they get their metrics overnight, they'd be training the next day, have a NovoTHOR treatment, go to sleep, record all these metrics again, and the metrics would be better, having had used the NovoTHOR after training.
And then there was a control group, obviously.
Well, the controllers themselves, so they compare the night before NovoTHOR with the night after NovoTHOR.
So these were only one-off acute benefits.
Yeah, that's right. And then there'd be a washout period, and then 2 weeks later they'd do it again.
Interesting. So do you think then, you mentioned the twice monthly session was not optimal. What would be optimal based on your experience?
Well, personal experience is I use it every day and I miss it when I don't. But that's not a sort of a controlled trial. So we don't have that data yet. So there are groups, more and more institutes, shall I say, like hospitals and military, who are doing research with an NovoTHOR, trying to find out what its clinical benefits are, and hopefully, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be the military in the United States who are going to figure out what the best timing is for us. So ask me next year.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. I look forward to getting those results.
So there we go. So exercise performance, improving sleep quality, I've just mentioned. Nocturnal hypertension, there was a study on fibromyalgia. So patients were treated for 3 times a week for 4 weeks, which is more of a typical use of NovoTHOR. 3 times a week for 4 weeks. I mean, these people have had it for years. One of the problems for, let's say if you're normal, there's when we go to bed and we go to sleep, our heart rate drops by about 10 to 20% overnight. And it doesn't happen in fibromyalgia patients, not so much, or maybe not at all, or sometimes what they call inverse dipping. So that dip in your blood pressure. Did I say heart rate? I should have said. Let me just correct what I just said. I meant blood pressure. I didn't.
But the heart rate probably drops about 10-20% anyway, wouldn't it? As well.
That's a good point. There was certainly improvements in people's heart rate in their other studies. Right. I don't think they measured it in the fibromyalgia study, but then they did measure blood pressure and nocturnal blood pressure, which is in healthy people goes down 10 to 20%. In fibromyalgia patients, it doesn't drop so much, and sometimes it doesn't drop at all, like it should do. In fact, sometimes they have what they call inverse dipping. Instead of a dip down, which we'd expect, it dips up. And you get this inverse dipping, which is a really bad sign for your health. And a lot of these patients had that. And what we were able to do, or that the hospital was able to demonstrate, is that the dipping actually improved in these fibromyalgia patients, which was a very difficult group of people to move the needle on medically. Nothing is proven to work successfully and consistently for fibromyalgia. And that's not just that we were measuring, this just happened to be one one metric they could measure. Of course, there was a separate clinical paper specifically all about pain and all about things like kinesiophobia, fear of movement, self-efficacy, the willingness to try new things, general quality of life, catastrophizing, this position where people are just, their mindset is, I'm never going to get better. Nothing's going to work for me. It's going to be like this for the rest of my life. And they're in this kind of despair. We managed to move the needle for all of the metrics to do with the quality of life and pain and movement and confidence to try new things. That was one paper. The second paper was looking at these sort of overnight metrics.
And what, were they using that daily, or was that a once a week?
That was 3 times a week for 4 weeks.
And then, okay, so then with the nocturnal blood pressure changes, were they only measuring it on the days that used the NovoTHOR, or is it regular?
Your blood pressure can go up and down every day and not be consistent. So they measured, they take the average of 7 days. You take a block of 7 days and take those measurements for that. So it's not, so you even out any of the bumpiness, so you get the averages in that. So that's, now how well does that translate to other forms of hypertension, which is the high blood pressure, yet to be discovered, yet to be proven. But I say that, in my memory is I remember other people talking about it. I haven't sought out the data to prove that it works in other forms of hypertension.
Yeah, I don't have high blood pressure, but it's sort of borderline, and I think it's partly a genetic thing.
Yeah.
Because I've had it since I was in my 20s. Pretty much every time I get a blood pressure test, I'd be like, oh, were you running late, or do you have a bit of stress? And after 10 years of hearing that, I think, you know what, no, maybe it's me, you know, it's not an acute thing.
And you add to it with your international travel as well.
Yeah, that does not help, and nor does 2 little kids and training and everything I do. For most of it, self-inflicted stuff. But I've just got a electric home system, you know, I don't know how reliable they are, but I've done before and afters immediately after a session using panels, 10, 15 minutes each side. And I see a drop instantly. Now, whether that's just the light or the fact I'm just standing and not doing anything for 10, 20 minutes, I'd need to be a bit more careful in terms of doing an experiment. But I can say, of course, I'm using red light therapy most days of the week, and I'm still up there in terms of the high blood pressure. But what would be interesting is if I stopped doing those sessions for like a month. Of course not, but maybe I could. It would be a good experiment, wouldn't it? Be a good review. Maybe I could stop doing it for like a month and see what happens to the blood pressure. Because sometimes that's a better way to test things, right? Like, take it away and see what happens. And if all of a sudden my blood pressure goes up another 10 points or something, then hey.
That's a good idea. And you'll find something called a natural experiment, which is one which is not prospective. You don't design the study in advance, but there will be times when you are not at home, not with all your panels, for a week or 2 weeks or something. And therefore that would be your natural experiment time. And I'm sure that's coming up in your life at some point.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I could do it right now, but I don't think it's a fair experiment given all the other stresses that are happening. Sure. But yes, no, maybe that's something I should do. Yeah, but interesting. I mean, it will be interesting to take a deeper dive into the literature around that. Hey, I know this is frustrating, but can I just ask for a quick favor? Hit the like button and subscribe. I have a bunch more interviews coming out in the coming weeks and months, so be sure to subscribe for that. All right, let's get back to the conversation.
The other thing I mentioned was oxidative damage. This is probably the best area of research in PBM. It's very clear that photobiomodulation reduces oxidative stress, which most people call free radicals. It's abundantly clear in so many studies. It doesn't really need to be repeated, but I did, of course, do a clinical, reported on a clinical study. Actually, it was an exercise study again on bicep contractions on a Biodex machine and measuring the amount of inflammatory markers as a result of that and how they go down so quickly after photobiomodulation, so which is part of a sign of oxidative damage, and the delayed onset muscle soreness they get, and so how we cleared that as well. So we were able to demonstrate, and as I said, these all play a role in delaying the onset of the 4 leading causes of non-accidental death. But that's not the end of it. Photobiomodulation has some other useful qualities, not necessarily directly related to the 4 leading causes of accidental death, but it improves heart rate variability, as I mentioned earlier, resting heart rate, which I mentioned earlier, VO2 max, which I didn't yet mention, These are all associated with a reduced risk of all-cause mortality. So this is whilst it doesn't tie specifically to the 4 main causes of death, generally, if you can improve your heart rate variability, improve your resting heart rate, increase VO2 max, it's a good signal for your improved lifespan, which is what this conference is about.
Because a lot of people watching this are going to think, okay, this all sounds amazing, but your research is done using a $100,000 to $200,000 device. Do you think if there's someone out there who's only got a smaller panel or a wrap or a targeted laser perhaps, they could see similar benefits? And also, what happens if someone is in a city where there's a clinic with a NovoTHOR and they can only get there, say, once a month due to financial reasons? Again, do you think they could see similar benefit?
I think the evidence from the elite women's soccer team in the United States was that this infrequent use has an effect that day. So there's no doubt you get a benefit for that day. How sustained it is, how are you benefiting in the following few days? Then I'm sure it's tapering off quite quickly. So yes, you get the short-term benefit, but I mean, let's imagine you didn't have any fruit and vegetables for a month. Would having fruit and vegetables for one day be a good idea? Absolutely.
Yes.
So yes. Yes, that's my answer really. I can't
Yeah, okay. What about going the other way then? You say you're using the NovoTHOR daily?
Yeah.
That's a 20-minute session?
I use it for 20 minutes a day, yeah.
I mean, I think I asked this last year, but have you experimented with doing 3 20-minute sessions a day?
I have done, and it can be a bit exhausting, actually. You can come up feeling a bit too tired. So quite why that is, it's uncertain. You could, instead of reducing oxidative stress, I could be increasing it at that point. And I should also say that I would imagine I feel like sometimes it's a bit, depends on my day. Even 20 minutes might be more than I need. And that sometimes, and I've been discussing this with other doctors, that sometimes you feel like, do you know what? That feels like enough. And you get out of 15 minutes or something. So I'm just slightly aware of my own body and the thing that, do you know that? I'm done. I'm cooked. And I have done, there's times when I've enjoyed staying there for, I'm not in a hurry. And I think I press that button again, I'll do another 20 minutes, something like that. So mostly not because I don't have the time, but it is a luxurious feeling to be actually in there. And the convenience of being in something where the top to toe, the whole body's getting treated. You're lying down, it's restful, it's a luxury experience, and most people usually fall asleep in it as well. It's something, it brings on sleep, and it could be right in the middle of your day, and you will fall asleep for, within 10 minutes and then sleep for 10 minutes. And it's a nice little nap.
It's so funny you say that, because I've heard that so many times, and I've actually never used the NovoTHOR ever. And it was only last month that I used, it was one of these Chinese, from China beds, first time. And all my years doing this, and I fell asleep.
Right.
I remember, I was drifting off and I did the whole twitch and then a few minutes later. Yeah. And I know that I fell asleep because when this machine stopped, it was horrible. It was a sudden chunk,
yes.
And that shocked me awake. And my Oura said I had like a 5-minute nap. I was like, oh my God. And prior to that, I'd used panels on a horizontal stand, and same thing. I'm like, this is completely different to standing next to the panel. I mean, distance-wise, everything's the same. So yeah, it's so funny you say that. I was going to ask a question then. What about, have you experimented yourself or even looked at research on this in terms of timing when you use it in a day? Morning, midday, evening?
I haven't had that luxury. The first thing I do, I do 2 things. I make a cup of tea. I have a tea maker by the side of my bed, and I press that button and have my tea. And then I get in the NovoTHOR and then shower, breakfast, that normal stuff. I notice if I don't get in the NovoTHOR first thing, that's it. My day is just sprint every day. And the whole thing is, I don't get another moment in the day. So I'm pretty much working till midnight every day, 7 days a week. And
your 6
62, yes. And, I've, less since the pandemic, but, I've had this extraordinary traveling lifestyle. In 2019, I went to the States 15 times in 1 year. And I went to 2 different countries every month that year as well, on top of all of that, including 3 trips to Australia and New Zealand and that kind of thing. So I've had an intense life from working life, particularly over the last sort of 10 or so years as this kind of takes off. Yes, and so...
And how's your blood pressure then?
Oh, amazing, actually, because I've also got a non-familial hypercholesterolemia. So I should be going in the wrong direction with that. And by the way, photobiomodulation does not cure atherosclerosis, sclerotic disease. But it's, so if you've got a familial or non-familial hypercholesterolemia or a polygenic disease, then take the statins, take the ezetimibe, go to the PCSK9 inhibitors if that's what you need. It's the extreme end of things, because you can I would be making LDL cholesterol, ApoB, and LP little a, just eating salad, and that's what caused the disease. Nothing moved the needle. I tried it for 10 years, and I couldn't move it. And so all sorts of diets and exercise, didn't touch it. Doing the drugs, solved that. My blood pressure is typically around 110 over 70 something. So that is a very healthy, optimal thing. And that's like having a relatively much younger cardiovascular system than my age. And yesterday, as I told you, but for the benefit of the camera, I think I told you yesterday, maybe I didn't. There's a booth opposite our stand at the conference with a device that measured grip strength. Now, grip strength is another metric for sort of your potential longevity. Apparently it correlates really well, your grip strength. I was quite nervous. I think, I don't go to the gym. I mean, I walk to work with a heavy rucksack, backpack, and I march at quite a high pace, and it's a 35-minute walk, and that's a very important part of my healthy lifestyle for me. I thought, I don't do anything in the gym. With this grip strength, I'm going to be embarrassed, and I'm 62, and I know I don't look it, but I'm going to be embarrassed by what I do. So I pre-announced, I'm 62. I have no exercise routine apart from my walk. But I want to try to see how bad it is for me. I was feeling nervously thinking. So I grabbed this thing, pulled this whatever, not quite a trigger, but and grip it as hard as I could. And the guy on the booth was astonished by this number. He said, that's amazing. He said, and I said, why? And he said, 55.1. It was like a 40-year-old. Wow. So, I don't know. It's that's as if all these biomarkers and these other metrics, health metrics, are not enough from clinical trials. It's nice to see some interesting things, a bit like you taking your blood pressure, and I've monitored mine just once a week, but I've never done it before and after. Now this grip strength thing, we're beginning to think it might be working.
Yes, I mean that's remarkable. I mean, I didn't even know you were in your 60s. And you're so sharp, and I mean, you're all over this content, and it's quite impressive. So then to hear that as well, you've got the physical. Yeah, I mean, I've been well aware of grip strength, the correlation between aging and that. And it's something, I mean, I go to the gym, I like it. I'm like, oh, well, hopefully I'm ticking that box at least. So I'll have to go to that booth later on and do the test. But yeah, it is quite remarkable. What about, have you as a company, have you looked into the links between PBM and brain? I mean, you touched on it earlier, like Alzheimer's, dementia, and that. Is that an area that you see yourself going down as a company?
Yes, we are considering carefully about where we what we put our energies into, and so we are looking for. It's not hard to find, but for what are called clinically unmet needs. So find disease and injuries for which there are no alternative solutions. So there's been, whilst we could say diet, exercise, and sleep are good solutions, and they are, and this is everything everyone should practice as help, but there are no good medical interventions for things like fibromyalgia already mentioned. One we're having good success with that, having good success with with our desktop system, where we do a treatment inside the mouth for cancer patients to prevent the development of oral mucositis, which is a common side effect of high-dose chemotherapy and radiotherapy. What else are we going to do? What are we going to do next? And Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease are definitely on the radar for us. This is going to take significant sums of money. As you know, I'm also involved through another photobiomodulation company developing a treatment for dry age-related macular degeneration, which is the leading cause of blindness in the developed world. There is no proven effective treatment for this, and yet through 18 randomized controlled clinical trials, we've unequivocally shown that we can improve visual acuity and prevent the progression of the disease over, at least for the 2 years that we've been doing the studies. That costs $40 million to do all that. And Alzheimer's, done properly, is going to be of that order of cost, so if not more. So it's going to require a plan and a big chunk of money to go and fund that. And so we're looking carefully at that. There are other things we'd look at. Chronic non-healing wounds is a major area as well. We'd take a look at. So those are how we're thinking about things at the moment.
If someone's using the NovoTHOR, what's that putting out, 30 to 40 milliwatts?
Well, yes, depends how you measure it. So the way, because of our relationship with the US military, we know that they've been doing their own tests, and they say, why are you reporting 30 milliwatts per centimeter squared on your website when it says on our meter 48 milliwatts per centimeter squared? The difference was we test every panel before it's a finished piece of equipment. When you actually put the two halves together and you turn it on and you measure it as they were, as a finished device, because of all the reflected lighting, you get to see more of it, and they don't test with somebody in it either. So when you think the reality is, when you're lying in it, you're receiving 30 milliwatts per centimeter squared to your skin, and then, yes, you don't cover every square centimeter of it with your body, so there is a certain amount of extra reflection. I've done some tests, and it does go up a little bit even with the body inside it. So it's 30 in the factory, it's 48 in reality and it's somewhere in between when your body's in there.
Okay, so, and you've got your red and your near-infrared light. So that's going to mean the brain is going to be receiving.
Yes, well, so you get these indirect effects. So University of Texas did a little pilot study, putting volunteers into the NovoTHOR, and they have a device, BB-NIRS, broadband near-infrared spectroscopy device. They kind of attach it to their forehead, and it can measure the hemodynamic response in the brain. So it can sense blood flow changes, and more specifically, it can measure oxygenation, deoxygenation, and it can calculate cytochrome C oxidase activity. So cytochrome C oxidase is the terminal enzyme of the electron transport chain in your mitochondria, and everybody talks about mitochondrial health and the photobiomodulation's effect on that. Don't think the photobiomodulation for our NovoTHOR is getting into the brain. There are indirect mechanisms by which this is happening. So possibly when I look at all the studies using photobiomodulation on the brain, many of them which report positive effects are using relatively low LED photobiomodulation light, and it's not enough to get through the hair if you've got some, through the scalp, through the cranium, past the dura covering the brain, into the cortical neurons. No, I don't think it's getting there. Actually, it's an indirect mechanism. There is blood flow from your scalp down into your brain. They're called emissary veins. And so maybe through that mechanism or some mechanism we haven't thought of yet. But by whatever mechanism there is there, they were able to measure the changes of blood flow and oxygenation in the brain and cytochrome C oxidase activity in the NovoTHOR. So we know it's having some kind of effect inside the brain, even if it is indirect. And then we've also been involved in a study on, it's tiny, it's on long COVID brain fog, and they use something called the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Scale, and looking at the patients who had the worst long COVID that were potentially showing signs of early stage Alzheimer's disease. so it was that kind of severe. When I looked at the people who were particularly bad, and there were 4 of them in the potential Alzheimer's disease, at least on the scale, what they really had was long COVID, brain fog. We moved 3 out of 4 of them from the Alzheimer's disease up to the maximum score you can get, which on the MOCA scale is 30. So we took them all from being in the mid-20s up to 30s. One of them, which was particularly poor, at like 22, I think it was, we took to 27 on the scale. So all 4 people who were particularly severe responded very well to that. In using the NovoTHOR, which encourages us to do more long COVID work, that's another area of interest for us.
So do you think there's a place for the more powerful targeted devices, brain devices?
Well, first of all, the devices you see on the internet being sold for wellness are far from powerful. So those aren't them. But there are powerful devices being used. The University of Texas in Austin, they've been doing the more powerful photobiomodulation treatments to the brain. They use lasers, quite powerful, several watts over a fairly large spot area. So the density of light is about 250 milliwatts per centimeter squared. Very good penetrating wavelength, gets just to the right prefrontal cortex, and there's some great results with that.
Great results. What were the Alzheimer's? We're talking Alzheimer's?
Not Alzheimer's disease. They do a lot of healthy human volunteer studies and look at performance, so improving learning and memory. So they do things like delayed match to sample tests, which is a really complicated mental test that you do, and they show that people can perform better if they're in a photobiomodulation group compared with a placebo group, compared with exercise groups. Now, exercise helps as well, and they've compared all 3, and they've done exercise and photobiomodulation together, and to see how fast they can do these tests and how many mistakes that they make. And it's certain the photobiomodulation helps with speed, exercise helps with speed, combined helps with speed. In terms of correct answers in the study, photobiomodulation alone was better than the other 2 groups.
Do you see that? Are you then personally tempted to start using lasers, 100, 200 milliwatts on your head?
No, I feel I get enough from the NovoTHOR from it. I don't know that I'm missing anything. I'm intrigued by it. It's not my area of concern at the moment.
Fair enough. So I don't know if I've told you this. So my son was diagnosed with epilepsy a couple of years ago. I may have. Anyway, we're currently using laser. This isn't like we're working with a specialist. That's one of his practice, one of his protocols. And yeah, we're using the laser. Now, the lasers he wanted to use are $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 because the medical lasers. And I said, look, you tell me what those specs are, and I'll test one and I'll find one myself. And I found one for about $4,000 or $5,000. It's putting out about 150 milliwatts, 808, 850. I think there's a 900 in there as well. And yeah, the size is about yay big. And so we're using that on my son. And he's doing EEG scans every month. And then based on those results, the treatment areas, change. It's too early to say. My son's seizure free at the moment, which is great. And we're dropping the medication, which is great. And we're actually seeing some little cognitive boosts. He's 5 years old, which is awesome. Whether that's the PBM we've introduced, whether it's coming off the medication, whether it's just a learning development phase, who knows? Maybe it's all of the above. But it is very, very fascinating. And it's kind of exciting how all of this is coming full circle. One thing, though, his doctor has expressed is we need to be very careful with where we treat in the brain. Because he's saying if you overexpose an area or treat an area that's already overactive in the brain, it could, in fact, cause potential issues or imbalances. Is this something that you...
So is the doctor got some expertise in photobiomodulation?
Yes, he's actually booked to come to PBM 2024.
Okay.
Dr. Randy Beck from the IFN clinic, neurologist. But he's had some things come up recently, so I don't know if he's going to make it, unfortunately.
Do you know what laser he uses? Brand?
I can't off the top of my head, no, I can't.
Do you know what parameters he said he was using?
Yeah, I'm not
Wavelength and radiance?
Yeah, it was similar to what we was 900s. There was something in the 800s. I think it was a 850 or 870, and then there was one or two in the 900s.
I think, yeah.
I think it was about that. I'd have to pull up the notes.
I think I can maybe guess which one it is. So the thing this thing about milliwatts per centimeter squared, the irradiance, the intensity of light on the body, is a very important one. But another one that's not discussed is the fact that an irradiance from a beam that's the size of, say, a pinhead versus the one that's the size of, I don't know, something that size, which maybe the one that he's using has got that sort of beam size, wouldn't compare, because to get, let's say the irradiance was for, do you know what number he was using?
Yeah, so it was about a 170.
170 milliwatts per centimeter squared. Okay, so let's say you get 170 over that area, and you've got another one which is like size of a pinhead, 170. Yeah. The amount of energy you're delivering is wildly different, because this would be 100 times more area than the tiny pinprick one, and therefore the total energy you're delivering is going to be 1/100th of what he's delivering. And these do not translate easily. So you'd have to. It's a complicated. This is why it's so difficult to translate from one research study you've seen to a different product. So this is a.
Yeah. Okay. So, sorry, I wasn't necessarily asking that for personal reasons. I just know I've interviewed him on the channel, right? And we've talked about this. And it's actually a lot of people are they're worried that they could potentially be over-treating their brain, for instance, whether it's from a panel or some of these headsets, the more powerful ones. And I mean, I get it. We're talking about the brain here, right? And I was just curious as to whether that was...
Well, there is one mouse study done about 10 years ago, which did demonstrate that it was like 14 consecutive day treatments on a mouse, we should say, so that's very small. They did actually have some, when I say adverse events, the results, whatever the test was they were doing, I can't remember what outcome measure they were using. Was it a traumatic brain injury thing? Might have been. Whether you use a Morris-Watermaze test, probably. But whatever it is, the results were actually negative. They didn't help, in fact, it made it worse. Now, that might have just been one acute thing and then come back a week later and it's absolutely fine. So, and I'd have to look that up. So there is a limit, but it was a mouse, and the tiny little things that mice are, and it's probably quite easy to overtreat a mouse. Probably quite difficult to do it to a human.
Yeah.
There are studies back from 2008, 9, 10, where it did use some quite strong, powerful lasers all over the brain. From a company called Phototherapy. They had a $150 million raise for treating stroke. They did the study, didn't prove any efficacy. It was a bit of a mystery because they did 3 studies. 250 patients worked quite well. 650 patients looked like it was quite well. To 1,000 patients, did a futility test at halfway through the study, just making sure this is working. We're not wasting everybody's time. Oh, it doesn't look like it's wasting. Cancelled the trial, closed the company. The venture capitalists walked away with it so fast. We never found out why it didn't work on the 3rd trial. But they were using a lot of laser light in that. And so my takeaway from it, from the first 2 studies, is they certainly didn't do any harm. One of the limitations was, though, they only treated once. Now, it wasn't acute stroke, so they treated within 24 hours. And there is no doubt that if you can treat within 24 hours of anything, that's good. It's better, by the way, in my experience, with the kind of things I'm more familiar with, like post-operative pain or acute traumatic injury, like from sports injury. If you can treat within minutes, it's even better. Yes. So if you've ever tried it yourself, you think like, oh, that's going to feel bad tomorrow. Anyway, I've treated it now, and you wake up tomorrow morning thinking, am I sure I injured myself yesterday? I just don't feel it. Have you ever had that experience?
Yeah, of course. I have a lot, and it's funny you say that because I've read from a few people, experts in this space, who have one particular book. There was a recommendation in there that first responders should be carrying.
I think so.
Whether it's a handheld laser or some sort of device, because they're first on the scene.
I think so. We would save a lot of money downstream, really. I think.
It's quite fascinating, really. Another quick question then, what about because I get this quite a lot, long-term, how long have you been using the NovoTHOR?
First one we made was in 2013, and it was a single-sided device, and getting better since then, really. And I only had one in my house for the last 5 years.
Have there been many long-term use studies on?
Well, I've been using photobiomodulation myself since 1987, so that's my first experience. So that's 37 years. So if that's a long-term study, it's kind of...
Fair enough.
And then 10 years worth of increasing amounts of NovoTHOR treatment, and particularly the last 5 years, every day, where I am when I'm in the country. It's the same. I think I'm these days, post-pandemic, not traveling so much. I'm getting about 20 sessions a month in.
Well, okay, cool. PBM 2024, it's coming up. Are you going to be presenting it? Or are you just sort of behind the scenes running it or emceeing it? What's your role?
I will do a presentation. I haven't made my mind up which one I'm doing.
Right, okay, cool.
I've got one penciled in all about beam measurement. It's a subject that bothers me very much because so few people appreciate how important it is. That's what I was tempted with. I'm also very excited by what I've put together for this conference. I think, I'd like to present that. And so, because I'm actually on the organising committee for it, I probably get a bit of a privilege. I know I've got a slot, and I might change my mind what I'm going to do in that slot. So undecided at the moment. One of those two. If I could get both in, that would be my favourite thing to do.
So why don't you share with the audience a bit about the event? Why would be a great event for someone interested in photobiomodulation to attend, and what they can expect to learn and come across over those few days?
Well, for 30 years, there's been the World Association for Photobiomodulation Therapy. It used to be called laser therapy, so that's why it's called WALT, W-A-L-T. Every other year there's been a conference. So I first went in 1992, I think it was, that I went to that. And this is their 14th annual conference. And it's in London from the 23rd to 25th of August. All the best scientists in the field of photobiomodulation are going to be there. They're going to be covering every topic we've just spoken about and more, ranging from neurology, through oncology, through sports medicine, neuropathic pain, musculoskeletal pain, non-healing wounds. There'll be mechanistic papers there, trying to still figure out and perfect how we understand what photobiomodulation does. There'll be people looking at dose responses. There'll be every kind of scientist there and every kind of practitioner trying to find out, basically what this thing's capable of, how it does it. There's going to be some data on the economic benefits as well in our National Health Service too.
Very, very cool. And where can people find out more about it? The website?
pbm2024.com.
Cool. And then what about yourself, Thor Laser? Where should people go if they want to learn more about what you're doing as a company and if they want to jump in one of these NovoTHOR?
Yes, so you could go to NovoTHOR.com, NovoTHOR.com, if you want to look at the whole body system. ThorLaser.com is where we have our desktop laser products as well, and you can sign up for newsletters and things like that.
Cool, James. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. And that is a wrap. I told you it was a good one. Again, if you haven't already, leave any questions or comments down below. Feel free to head over to our Light Therapy Insiders website and also our Facebook group. There's nearly 10,000 people in our Facebook group. So if you're not in there, jump in there. Links are all down below. Of course, I am going to be in the UK August 2024. So very, very soon. I'm going to be attending the PBM 2024 event. I can't wait. There's going to be some big names there. If you live in the UK or Europe, or to be honest, if you live anywhere in the world, I'm traveling up from New Zealand. So if I can make it, I guess you can as well. But yeah, if you are going to go there, let me know down below because I'd love to meet up. Otherwise, I'm sure I'll be able to do a bunch of interviews while I'm there. So there's going to be even more content coming out. And these people are like the brain's trust when it comes to red light therapy. So there's going to be some awesome interviews. So otherwise, I'll see you in the next video, which is up here. By the way, remember, I interviewed James a year or two ago. So if you haven't seen that already, links are down below. Otherwise, click this one.